You hear me? Hello.
Yeah.
Yes.
I can hear you.
Hello. Yes. Happy birthday to you. Yeah. By the way, that you teach us how to. Yes. The topic tonight is very realistic and practical. Can you hear me well? Yes. The topic tonight is very realistic and practical, particular for the pandemic. I would like you to explore a bit about because you mentioned about the death. What about deathless? Deathless? How can, because we're going to die, but in which way that we, but our mind in the deathless? DEATHLESS. Thank you.
Well, heedfulness, appamada, is the path to the deathless. When you have a moment of heedfulness, you're not dead, as it were. When we lose our mindfulness and we get lost in the mental proliferation, the moods and all the thoughts of the mind, and we're lost in that, we're not mindful, it's like the mind is dead already. Ajahn Chah used to say, if you're not mindful for 5 minutes, it's like you're dead for 5 minutes. But when you're mindful, you're bringing your mind to the present moment. There's the opportunity to practice non-attachment, non-craving, not seeking anything, just knowing whatever phenomena arising in the present moment, how you feel, what you're thinking, to know that with non-attachment, with wisdom and insight, is the deathless. So to keep doing that through your life, keep bringing up mindfulness, coming back to the present moment over and over again, reflecting on impermanence, unsatisfactoriness, seeing the selfless nature in body and mind. This is bringing you to the deathless all the time, what we call the unconditioned, the unborn, the uncreated. Just keep doing it, and little by little your mind will get the message.
Right. Thank you. Another question, Luang Por. I heard about feeling in feeling, consciousness in consciousness. Would you please elaborate the feeling in feeling? Thank you.
Well, going on from the last question, when you're mindful and practicing sati and you're maintaining sati, it gives your wisdom faculty, your intelligence, the chance to operate, to work, because you're mindful. So they call mindfulness like the car, and wisdom is like the person sitting in the car. It brings you to pay attention to what's arising. So if you direct your attention to feeling, pleasant feeling, unpleasant feeling, or neutral feeling, neither pleasant nor unpleasant, there's an opportunity when you're mindful to see feeling as just feeling, which is seeing feeling in the feeling, meaning you're not creating anything out of that feeling. It's not leading on to thought formations. Pleasant feeling tends to lead on to liking and attraction and all the fantasizing and imagination associated with that. Unpleasant or painful feeling leads to negativity, aversion. I don't like it, I don't want it, get rid of that. And this is how the sense of self is formed. But when you're mindful, you're not doing that. The more you are mindful of feeling, you're just knowing feeling as feeling, which is feeling in the feeling. So you're seeing it as impermanent, just arises, passes away, and ultimately that's what feeling does. Even the most nasty, painful feeling, which may be difficult to bear with, of course, but in the end it's still temporary, and what is temporary is not a self, because it's temporary. Seeing not self or seeing emptiness is not saying there's no feeling, there's nothing there. It's there. It's the result of past karma. But if the mind is mindful enough, clear enough, it doesn't have to grasp and cling on to that feeling as self. So it's seeing feeling in the feeling, knowing it as it is, without any addition, without anything else. And the same with consciousness, because consciousness arises and passes away every moment, and it's very fast and very subtle, and it's a very, you might say, advanced practice to see that. As Venerable, as Anathapindika, the layman, said, you know, he couldn't quite practice that yet because he wasn't at the level where his mindfulness was sharp enough, clear enough to do that. I'm sure he had some insights into it, but he wasn't yet able to do it, and he was honest about that. So that's the hardest thing, you know, to be mindful of consciousness. But the way into it is to see consciousness is like a vessel. You know, the Buddha said there's mind that knows, and then there's the mental states that arise with the mind, with consciousness. And they change, don't they? There's wholesome ones, unwholesome ones. So a wholesome mental state may be the thought of kindness or faith arising or mindfulness arising. These are examples of wholesome mental states. Or you may have an unwholesome mental state, greed, anger, or some kind of delusion, confusion, worry, fear. So this is your way of seeing consciousness or getting to consciousness. You're seeing the mental states arising with it, and you're seeing them as temporary, impermanent. They don't last, they change. And this is getting you to see what's behind the mental states, which is just the basic consciousness which knows experience. So seeing consciousness in consciousness is just knowing it as it is. There's no self there. There's no additional creation or fabrication around it. It's just knowing consciousness as consciousness. But, you know, to do that properly and well, that's really somebody who's getting very close to being an enlightened arahant.
Right. Luang Por, is there any sort of consciousness, like no content at all? No content in it at all?
No
Or
content?
or must have a content in it. The consciousness.
Oh, I see. Well, knowing, it's knowing at all times that whatever content there is not self. So even an arahant, they have consciousness, and they have feeling, and they have thought formations, they have objects of mind, but they don't grasp to any of it as self. So their consciousness is purified by their wisdom. You know, they just don't grasp or believe any of it as self and don't grasp it as self. Whereas what we do is we keep making a self out of it all. So the content will always be there until you know, one dies and enters Nibbana maybe. But at the moment, even if one was to reach arahant, there'd still be content in the mind. It's just any aspect of the five khandhas, the mind is not grasping at as self or clinging to as self.
Very clear. Thank you, Luang Por.
Luang Por, can I now please invite Upu from Colombo? Upu, can you unmute yourself? Okay.
First of all, I wish you happy belated birthday, and I wish you for a long life. And I'm happy to make a wish for myself. One day I can come to see you physically and bow down to you. So that is my wish. And Luang Por, I have two questions. I'm seeing most of the time I'm dreaming Ajahns, like Ajahn Brahmang, so Ajahn Kalyano, Luang Por, and sometimes so many Ajahns I can dream. And in my dream, I feel my mind is like getting blissed, and I'm very happy even in the dream. So is it getting some merit, or is it a good thing? I'm feeling that I'm in my heart, it's so peaceful, and in the dream even I can feel so blessed. So is it a good thing, or even in the dream can I make merit in that way? That is my first question. And the second one, when I am doing meditation, like walking meditation, at some point I'm feeling whether I'm doing this correctly. So I'm having some doubts. So those were my two questions. Sadhu, 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 Lupo.
Well, first of all, I wish you well. Thank you for your kind wishes, and I wish you well in your practice. Dreams are very normal, particularly for people who meditate. They quite often will have dreams. So if you have a very good dream, a peaceful state of mind in your dream, that tends to be a good sign, I think, sign of somebody who is practicing the Dhamma, putting effort into their mindfulness practice, developing wholesome states of mind, practicing dana perhaps. So it may come out in dreams, just as our more unwholesome states of mind can prompt dreams, where not such good things are happening. There are many different kinds of dreams we have. Some are just coming from the normal confusion of daily life. It's like a hangover. As we fall asleep, that confusion prompts dreams, or as we're waking up, it prompts dreams. Sometimes it's associated with illness. So as I was saying earlier, when we get ill, our mind becomes a bit weaker because the body is physically weaker. We're more prone to the dream state, and a lot of those dreams can be very confusing or even like nightmares. But people who meditate often have quite clear dreams, maybe very brief, and often they're quite wholesome. They see monks or have good meditation experiences, or some pleasant thing happens, and that's probably an expression of the good karma we're making, at least some of the time. But in your dream, your intention is very weak. It's possible, as we know, you can wake up in your dream. So it seems like there's a little bit of mental intention there to keep the precepts, do some good, perhaps. But it's very weak, and that's because it's a dream. So really what you want to do is, as soon as you wake up, even if you're waking up within the dream, establish mindfulness, come back to the body, the breath, and then you're making very good karma coming out of that dream. And you can learn something from dreams. If you've done something not very good, well, you can learn, oh, I'm not going to do that again, and I'll make sure I won't. Or if you've done something good, you say, oh, that was good. You can learn from these things. But the important thing is establish mindfulness as soon as you can. Just as when you're waking up in the morning, you want to be as mindful as soon as you can. Go to the breath, come back to the body. Then you're making powerful good karma. In a dream, it's normally speaking, you'll be very weak kind of karma because your intention is very weak. As far as walking meditation goes, like any other meditation technique and posture, your aim is to maintain mindfulness, put effort into bringing up a state of mindfulness. So you need an object to do that, certainly in the beginning. So it may be the feet touching the ground is a very commonly used one. As the right foot touches the ground, you're noticing the feeling, the pressure, the lifting, and then the pressure of the right foot, left foot, right foot, left foot. In Thailand, we were taught to recite the word Buddho, from Buddha, Buddho. So right foot down, Buddho, left foot down, Buddho. As far as the pace of it goes, some people walk very slow, some people faster. And if you walk meditation regularly, you might find that you get into a more normal pace, not necessarily the very slow pace that you often see people doing on retreats. But if you're in a room with a very small area to walk, well, a very slow pace may be appropriate. But if you're walking outdoors and you've got space, well, often you end up walking quite a normal pace. Keeping your attention on the ground in front of you. Usually keep your hands in front of you like that, maybe. Watching the ground and keeping mindful of the feet touching the ground, or the recitation of Buddho. Keeping your mindfulness within the body as you walk up and down your walking path. Not letting the mind drift off into daydreams. You notice when you start daydreaming, your mind, you stop maybe and you're looking around, hear sounds, what's that? Or you think of a thought and your mind is as if going off to another place. So bringing the attention back to the present moment within the body. And you may find when your mindfulness is more continuous, you can contemplate. You can contemplate vipassana, impermanence, the rising and passing away of sight, sound, taste, touch, smell, feelings. You can contemplate the body. I know one monk who likes to contemplate the bones of his body as he walks meditation. He says when his meditation gets good, he can actually hear and sense the bones cracking together, because it's like he's just focused on the bones of the body. There's many, many approaches to this, but when you're calm, you can contemplate more. But in the beginning, you have to bring up the mindfulness. So you have to keep things very simple, just with the feet or with the recitation of Buddha, perhaps.
Right. Could I please now invite Brother S.T. Lee to please unmute yourself.
Yes, I'm unmuted now. Long for many, many happy returns of the day. May you continue to enjoy good health and well-being, so that we can continue perhaps to receive all the Dhamma teachings from you. I think the story that you've told us about Ajahn Kalyano is very, very inspiring. It reminds, of course, us of the story of Buddha himself in his parinirvana. Even at the stage where he was dying, in the final stages, he was still able to do a lot of things, including teaching. And I think for those of us who have reached a stage where we know that life is almost in the balance, in other words, either due to our age or our physical and mental well-being, the one thing I feel that one could be fearful of, despite our practice, is our mental capacity. In other words, to be able to retain our mental faculties right till the very end, so that we can actually do what Ajahn Kalyano was able to do. In other words, still having the generosity of heart to think of others, even in our dying hours, as it were. So just wanted to maybe hear from Long Paul what you think our approach should be, either to ourselves or to people that we care for, whose mental state is no longer as good as was. In other words, they have some degree of mental degeneration. What are your thoughts, Long Paul, about the management of this group of people who are having different degrees of dementia? Thank you.
Yeah, it's always going to be challenging. And when you do meet people who are suffering from dementia, senility, or any other aspects, more extreme aspects of aging, one thing it does, if you're not yet at that point, it shows you the value of the faculties you still have. You still have your memory, the ability to think, and maybe to meditate. Then, when you're engaging with people who are more seriously ill than yourself, that's one reflection you always get, is just to see the value of your own good health and, get the inspiration and the motivation to use your time well while you have it, while you have a healthy body. It's one of our great blessings is while we have good health, and well, one day it may not be like this because you're caring for someone you can see, and this is what happens when you get older. For that person, you do the best you can. If they still have any kind of ability to remember and communicate, well, you do your best to stimulate them in a good way. You talk about old times, help to stimulate their memories with photographs, discussion about good things they've done in their life. That can be very helpful and reassuring for them if they're still able to do that. If they've gone beyond that stage and they just can't remember anything anymore and can't really concentrate, well, you do the best you can with love, compassion, and the power of the mind. When you have a thought of compassion, it's still a very powerful mind state. So you can always meditate for someone who's even got Alzheimer's or dementia. Of course, your expectations, you have to manage them. You're not going to see them suddenly change or recover. You don't expect that. But the power of your compassion, if you are in a room with them, meditating, sending your thoughts to them, and of course, maybe doing other actions, caring for them. You can massage them, you help them dress or whatever it is that they need. That can be a very powerful, good thing for them at the end of their lives. Don't underestimate the power of the human mind, even if words can no longer convey messages that they can't communicate anymore. The mind is still having its effect. And so if you are close to that person and you meditate in the room with them or you chant in the room with them, send your thoughts of kindness, compassion to them, that can still help them. Don't ever forget that or underestimate that. Obviously, there's the physical side where we do what we can to care for them, look after their needs. But the mind is important, and we benefit when we're training our mind in meditation for somebody else, meditating on their behalf, sending our thoughts to them. We're benefiting as well as them. But of course, the real reflection is life, and this body is impermanent. Our health is impermanent. So while you still have good health, use it to do good. Practice mindfulness, practice meditation, help others, learn the Dhamma, listen to the Dhamma like Anathapindika, and keep that up as long as you can, while you can.
Thank you.
Sadhu Lampa. Okay, let's take a final question from Jesslyn. Jesslyn, can you unmute yourself? Thank you.
Good day, Long Paul. Thank you, Long Paul, Sadhu Long Paul, for all your teaching, and happy birthday, Long Paul. Long Paul, I'm just very grateful to Long Paul this 1 over year for teaching us the Dhamma, opening up your kindness and compassion to teach us the Dhamma. Every week we have 2 hours of wholesome mental states, because listening to the Dhamma would be wholesome mental states. And this is only possible. Thank you, Sister Vita. We will not be able to get connected and contact with Long Paul without Sister Vita and all in Singapore. So I would like to express my gratitude to all, to Long Paul and to Sister Vita and all. Long Paul, a question here is, there is a time that Long Paul said, if you come to Malaysia to see you, I'm not very sure when Long Paul will be coming to Malaysia or when I'll be going to Australia physically, but at least we can still meet virtually. So my progress is that the mental state is much more on the happy side. Listening to Long Paul's teaching, and I think Long Paul has been my teacher for a long time because of the book Everything is Teaching Us by Ajahn Chah. So I look at a lot of things as experiences, as something teaching me to look at things in a different way. So that is way before this, maybe about 10 years ago or less. Yes. So I want to say thank you very much, Long Po. Long Po, coming to listen to Long Po's talk I feel very happy during the talk and after the talk. Is this what we call piti in meditation? So Long Po, that's my question. And is that tranquility as well when we are listening to the Dhamma talk? Is that also part of it? Yes. Thank you very much, Long Po, for the opportunity to ask question. Sadhu Long Po, may Long Po live long and healthy. Thank you.
Well, thank you again for the kind wishes and words of appreciation. The same to you. May you live long and well and happy, and may your practice flourish. Yeah, listening to the Dhamma is part of the practice, isn't it? And it kind of gives you a measure of where your mind's at. You're not going to experience piety and joy and tranquility every time you listen to Dhamma, perhaps, and you can notice that. Sometimes all the factors and conditions are there and your mind settles down quickly. The Dhamma seems to go in deep. You become maybe very happy, very peaceful listening. And then other times it doesn't. And you may be sitting there saying, why don't I feel the same peace today? And, whatever the teacher says doesn't go in, you can't concentrate, your mind won't settle down, and you have to deal with that as well. And that's life, isn't it? But generally speaking, we're training ourselves to appreciate Dhamma and to listen to Dhamma with mindfulness, to give it importance and to reflect on what we're hearing. And so sometimes, yes, piti and joy will arise, like Anathapindika, tears of joy arose from a teaching which he said, I can't actually practice exactly what you've taught, but still he had great joy. Sometimes that joy, the piti, goes even deeper, and then you might experience what we call tranquility of body and mind. And you may occasionally even go into a state of samadhi, listening to Dhamma, one-pointedness. Ajahn Chah used to say, listen to the Dhamma with your heart, and if your heart turns away from the words and it's no longer contemplating or trying to listen to the meaning of the words, but just goes to the heart itself, that's okay. And this does happen for people, and sometimes you listen to the words for a while and then your mind just goes in deep and you don't hear the words anymore. It's just within its own state of samadhi. The body is very light, mind is light. If you hear teachers talking about listening to Luang Por Man, one of the leaders of our tradition, the grandfather of forest monks, they said when the monks listened to Luang Por Man give a talk, they just wouldn't even feel their bodies. They might be totally tired and worn out from a day of practice or travel or whatever, and they would just be sitting there like this, just floating on air, listening to Luang Por Man give a talk. Such powerful talk, good feeling from the teacher, and then their own samadhi coming up. There is one drawback to that. It can be a little bit addictive because, we all want to feel good like that. So people sometimes they're relying on the Dhamma teacher and the talk to do it for them. What, of course, we have to do is learn to practice mindfulness and meditate for ourselves. So we're not totally reliant on the teacher, although we can appreciate the teacher. But with Luang Por Man, the monks were always getting a little bit restless when he didn't give a talk. And sometimes in his older years, when he was, a bit older and weaker, he might only give a talk once a fortnight. In his younger years, maybe he'd give a talk every night. But later on, it was more infrequent. So then the monks would get restless. And when's he going to give a talk? Because, they really want to talk, to hear the Dhamma, feel that good feeling, maybe to feel like they're floating on air. So there's a funny story. One of the monks, disciples of Luang Por Man, was called Luang Por Tongrat. He's one of Ajahn Chah's teachers. And Luang Por Tongrat was a very kind of powerful, confident figure, a little bit eccentric, you might say, but he was considered an arahant. So he's a noble one, an enlightened monk. But he lived with Luang Por Man, and they say he's one of the only monks, there weren't many, who could talk to Ajahn Man very directly and wasn't scared of Ajahn Man, perhaps because he was an enlightened monk himself. So there was one period at the end of Luang Por Man's life when the monks weren't getting any talks. And so they went to Luang Por Tongrat and said, look, he hasn't given a talk for 2 weeks now. Everyone's getting a little bit agitated and restless, and we really need a talk. Can you do anything? So Luang Por Tongrat, he couldn't force Ajahn Man to give a talk, but he thought, what will work? So he went and got a hammer, and he went to Luang Por Man's kuti in the forest with a hammer and some nails, and he sat down, he started banging nails into a piece of wood, making a racket. And Luang Por Man was very strict in the monastery. He said, if you ever wanted to do any kind of work, carpentry or chopping things, you have to go out to the back of the forest so you don't disturb anyone. So Luang Por Tongrat was doing this right outside of Ajahn Man's kuti, making a terrific racket. So sure enough, later on that day, Luang Por Man called a meeting of the monks. And that was often, he would do that in response to somebody's behavior. If someone had done something a bit foolish or annoying or wrong in some way, then he'd call a meeting and he'd scold the monks. So Luang Por Man called a meeting and started giving a talk about how we have to be mindful and not make noise and not disturb people's meditation, and we have to practice. And he'd go on giving a really good Dhamma talk, and all the monks were sitting there getting scolded, but they are all floating in ecstasy at hearing the good Dhamma. So good Dhamma isn't always sweet on the ear. Sometimes it can be tough on the ear, but the result is the same. You go into a state of samadhi. And the monks were very happy that Luang Por Tongrat made such a noise that day.
Thank you, Luang Por. Sadhu Luang Por. I think in Ajahn Chah's non-reflection, he says that when we listen to the Dhamma, we open our heart to listen to the Dhamma. So that is what I try to apply every time when I listen to the Dhamma. Thank you, Luang Por. Sadhu Luang Por.
All right, Luang Por, we know that this is the first weekend since your new year of another continuation. We have been enriched this weekend by your wisdom once again, and we'd like to perhaps seek permission from you to take leave now. And thank you so much for spending a good 2 hours with us today. And before we let you go, could I please kindly invite you to just give a little bit of instructions of what's going to come for next week's retreat, and so that our friends are aware what will be happening in the program. Thank you.
Okay, so next Saturday, the 9th of October, we have a one-day online retreat. So we'll be here in this place as usual, but it will be broadcast from 8 a.m. Melbourne time. So that's 6 a.m. or is it 5 a.m. Singapore time? Maybe 5 a.m. If you look at the poster, that will help. So it's a one-day retreat, so 8 a.m. through till 6 p.m. in Melbourne time. So it's a combination of sitting, walking meditation, Dhamma teachings, some chanting, some Q&A. So it's just an opportunity, if you're free, for you to have a day of practicing the Dhamma, just to get everyone back into their meditation retreat. We're coming to the end of the Vasa, the monastic retreat. That's in a few weeks' time. So we often do have a retreat at this time. And at the end of the day, we end our retreat with the traditional asking forgiveness from the Sangha. So we'll lead you doing that. The laity will be led doing that. And also there's a chance to offer robes. There'll be offering pang sakula, cast off robes to the Sangha. It's a time in Thailand, we call it the ceremony opening the gates of heaven and hell, which is a kind of shorthand way of saying making merit for your dead relatives. So a good way to make merit is offer robes to monks, traditional way. So at the end of the retreat, there'll be a robe offering. So if you're at home, you can get some cloth if you have it. It can be white cotton cloth, a piece of cloth, or a set of robes if you have. And virtually, you can offer them. You can chant as we chant, and then we'll give a blessing, and you can share the merits with your dead ancestors and relatives. Even if you don't have a piece of cloth to offer at home, don't worry, you can join in that ceremony. And if you do have cloth and you're wondering what to do with it afterwards, well, later on, maybe you can send it here, or you'll be able to travel here one day in the next period when they open up. You maybe even be able to bring it here yourself. So that's next Saturday, the 9th of October.